What I want to talk about today came from Rick, and this idea of this overnight success. He had given a little bit of the story about how he and I met at, where was it, South by Southwest a couple years ago. And he literally said over a couple of beers, he's like, wow, I didn't really know, I knew of him, and I had been to this conference since 2004, even before it was this conference. But he was like, I'm so proud of you, you're such an overnight success. And I looked at him and I wasn't sure if I was sad by that, because I'd been in the business for 20 years at that point, or excited. So what I wanted to bring to all of you today is not what I normally do. I normally train. I normally walk away with 3 key points about Google Plus or whatever. I mean, I used to train about Second Life, so there's that. Right? That was my first new media or Blog World talk was on Second Life. So we've evolved, or I've evolved. So I want to talk about this myth of becoming or being or wanting or hoping to be an overnight success. Not just in this field, but whatever you happen to do professionally, if this is a hobby, if this is the tool that you use to get your other message out. It's a myth. And when I describe it to people, I always use this analogy of an iceberg, right? So 90%, and don't look it up on Wikipedia because my percentages aren't exact, 90% of an iceberg is below the waterline. And that's where I work, and that's where all of you work. 10% is above the waterline. That's the part that people see. They download the podcast and they listen to you. They read your blog post. They, heart your Instagram photos. They see you on Twitter. That's the 10% that's above the waterline. We know that we need the 90% underneath it to get that job done above. So that's what I want to talk about today. This part is really hard for me, to be honest with you, because like I said, I'm a trainer. Like, I want to teach you how to do things, actionable items. What I'm going to do today, because we are all storytellers, is I'm going to share some of my story with you. So I'm going to go back 25 years. That's when I started in this business of tech for me professionally. I was originally going to go to college for mortuary science because I was afraid of people, and I figured if they're dead, it's all right. So that didn't quite work out for me. So I said, where can I go where there's no people? I'll go into tech, right? There's no people. I'm going to sit in my little cave and work on my computer. And now look where I am, right? People. But this idea of working in technology as a young woman, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old in the early 90s is horrifying for me to think about right now. But that's where my 90% under the iceberg, under the waterline where I work starts with. So this first part of the story has to do with perception. I was 23 years old, working in a company, worked my way up very quickly, and was one of the managers in the department of 40 techs. And I think there were 3 women, 2 of them were admins, and then there was me. I took a lot of baloney in that job. I loved that job. I worked all the time. I was probably chemically addicted to caffeine at that point. It's what I did. It's what I loved. Computers, engineering, it was in my blood. I realized one day, I did employee reviews and all that business, that everyone that worked for me made more money than I did and had better titles on their business cards than I did. I'm an idiot. I'm 23. I'm going to march right up to my boss's boss, and I'm going to fix this. Meanwhile, I had a job offer from a different company for nearly double my salary. I wasn't willing to take that job for more money because my heart lied with where I was, because I had some sense of loyalty to them. There's perception of loyalty. I had my letter of resignation. I walk into my boss's office. I sit down. And I say, can I have business cards with a better title on it? I didn't even ask for more money. I just wanted new business cards. He went into a rant telling me, you know how expensive business cards are to publish? Right? I'm like, and I sat there and he yelled at me for what seemed like a day, and he taught me probably the most valid lesson of my life to this point. His name started with a P, and he had this big brass P, like this bookend, on his desk. And he said, do you know what this P stands for, Lynette? And I was like, Paul? And he's like, no, it stands for perception. And the perception of you walking in this room and asking me for a better title on your business card tells me that you think you're better than other people, that your perception that you want other people to have about you is that you're superior, blah, 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 goes into this whole thing. I'm horrified. I'm sitting in this chair. I've got tears streaming down my eyes. I'm in my hands, I'm crumpling up this resignation letter because I'm thinking to myself, my boss's boss doesn't have a very good view of me. I have to be at this company longer until he views me in a better light. And then he looked at me and he said, Lynette, do you know what else this P stands for? And I said, Paul. He said, no. And I'm not going to say what he said it stood for, right? I'm 23 years old, and he leans over his mahogany glass top desk, and he says that word to my face. I lost my mind. Let me just say there were no charges pressed. I didn't give him stitches or anything like that, but I did, I lost my shit. I'm just gonna say it the way that it was. I took that and I threw it across the room. I was so angry that someone could perceive me for just what I look like and not for the hard work, the talent, and the dedication that I had for someone. I did take that crumpled up resignation letter and I threw it at him and I walked out. That lesson stuck with me to this day. And in this digital media revolution, the idea of perception is more important than ever. The perception is the 10% above the waterline, right? What everyone sees on an iceberg, what we put out on Twitter, what we want people to perceive us as. But what I've realized in these 25 years since I've started in the business is that it has more to do with how we perceive ourselves than what other people think of us. If we are so self-monitoring professionally and personally that we're only going to put all the rosy, beautiful things out online, that we're going to edit our audio to the point where we never say, you know, we're human, it's going to happen. We disassociate ourselves with who we truly are. And I think that that is a very big disservice for ourselves because it's not, I don't want to get all like crazy and like kumbaya on us, but going forward, if you don't have a strong sense of your own self-image or your own self-perception of how you see yourself and how you want others to see you, by what you put out there, what you tweet, what you record, what you write, the world isn't going to take you for who you are. It took me from that point, and that was the early 90s, and so my next point, which was this idea of perseverance. That I had worked my way through these amazing companies, and I was like, I'm going to be the next Sheryl Sandberg, and I didn't even know who she was, and you know, this is going to be me. I'm just going to make things happen for myself. This part of the story is hard for me to tell. It was, I had just gotten married, I just had a baby, I had saved money, I was gonna start my own business, and I was gonna start into this business, right? I didn't know what it was gonna do. I was blogging since '97, this was about 2001. So I figured, this is what I'm gonna do, right? I'm gonna ditch corporate, I'm gonna go over here. I have a good self-worth, my professional image is okay now. And then, this part's so hard, 9/11 happened. I had a 1-month-old baby, Rick's daughter's age. I'd begged my husband to stay home with me because this infant was insane. She was colicky, she didn't sleep, blah, blah, blah. That morning, my husband stayed home from work. When I came off maternity leave, the plan was, in my own head anyway, I was going to start my own business. My husband is an independent business person. This is what I wanted as well. Everything in my life changed, and it became survival mechanisms at that point. Because my husband's building where he worked, I haven't looked it up on the map exactly, but where that new Freedom Tower stands, that's where his building was. He should have been there that morning. He is with us home now, thankfully. This idea of preservation, of self-preservation, of going forward and making sure that whatever you do, you can get through wherever you are now. I love this quote, if you're going through hell, keep going. That's the last place you want to stay. So instead of taking this 1-month-old baby and going in and starting a technical and a marketing agency, I again lost my mind, and I took all my money and I opened a scrapbook store. What? My husband's like, are you nuts? And I said, yes, I am, actually. I had this idea that I needed to connect with people. I needed to get away from the technology. I needed to get away from the marketing and the sugarcoating. And I needed to make something more. And let me tell you something, a scrapbook is the original blog and Tumblr, because you've got photos, you've got journaling, you've got the artwork around it. It's like, it was perfect training for this. That store failed spectacularly because I'm really not cut out to run a retail store. Apparently, who knew, $100,000 later. That it taught me lessons about people that I didn't know before. This merger between the tactile and the technology and the people. So this idea of perseverance came through. At scrapbook stores, you normally have this event called a crop where people come, women, late at night, and you all work on your books and usually drink and eat M&Ms and do stuff like that. And it's just like the sewing circle kind of thing. One night I had 3 women come in. All 3 were either current or very former, like recently out of chemo for breast cancer. 3 women, 3 generations, a grandmother, a mother, and a daughter. The daughter was my age. They sat there and they could have made things really bad for themselves and been crying, and they did funny things and they documented their lives this way in books. And one of the ladies had come in a couple weeks later and said that she'd lost that book. And I said, well, you can blog, then it's digital and you won't lose it anymore. That point took me forward to where I am today, which is, well, back then what I wound up doing was I took that idea, I taught women, I taught other store owners, I taught everyone that I could. As my own store is failing, I went back into my career and I found ways to help people preserve their memories online, right? Just like a scrapbook. I took my talents and I put them to better use. I started a podcast in 2004 about scrapbooking, Under the Waterline. No one really knew about it except for the people that cared, right? So I didn't have a huge audience. I wasn't, shock jock kind of thing. It wasn't any of that business, but it was very important for the particular audience that I was at. You couldn't find a more niche audience. Those people saved my life going forward after nearly losing my husband for 9/11 and then going through and losing my store. I started a podcast. Does anybody remember Podcast Pickle? Right, okay, right? So we were on the boards, we were doing all of this. I was part of this conversation of what do we name this audio file on the radio, on the internet? That's why my name Lynette Radio, because I was a podcaster, right? So this idea of connecting with people through technology over the internet became so important to me. I started a podcast. I'm not in Wikipedia for this. I didn't put out messages. I didn't put out press releases. I landed a 6-figure sponsorship deal for my scrapbook podcast. I'm pretty sure that's unheard of even to today. Other people are on the books for being the first and the biggest and the blah, blah, blah. You know what? I don't care. They're the 10%. I work in the 90% because my version of success has to do with something else. And it wasn't to be popular. It was to go to the bank. So I want you to think about that too. Are you Twitter famous or are you bank famous? That brings me, my voice is gone. You can tell I've been traveling a lot. I love this quote. My friend J.C. Hutchins, I love him. If I had another brother that I didn't actually fight with, he would be it. And I put his Twitter handle in there because he's one of the only 3 people that I quoted that isn't dead, so you can actually tweet him. He always would say this thing, he'd be like, people, man, people. And it was either for good or for bad. That scrapbook podcast and the blogs and all of this corporate experience that I had moved me forward. And I could tell you something, the perception of others and the perception of myself has a lot to do with the success that a person gets, like your perception of yourself and how you're worried about how other people see you really can put a hindrance on the overnight success, on the success that you have. Because if you're too worried about making sure other people like you, you're never going to get what you really need, if you even have taken the time to figure that out. And this idea of this perseverance, if you can't get through the tough times or be willing to roll up your sleeves and get it done, this is not meant for you. Because this journey of mine is 25 years old. So the third is the people. All those two things would not make a difference today if it wasn't for the people. All of you in this audience, I could tell you all right now, I love you. And I say that jokingly, but this conference means a lot to me. This audience in this industry means a very, very lot to me. I started going when it was Portable Media Expo. Does anybody remember that? Right? So it was, you know, in Ontario, California, and we would get kicked out of the pool all the time, and it was this amazing community. Right? Accident hash would happen there. And those people have carried 10 years now, so it's 2014. So we're talking 10 years that this revolution has been going on, that I've been a part of it. I always call myself this D-lister. I am under the waterline. My success lies in other people's success. If it wasn't for the people sitting all of these chairs, the people that I met 10 years ago, the people that I'm going to meet in 2 days, none of this success matters. So when Rick tells me, you're an overnight success with Google+, I was like, damn, you know, I have been working really hard. I didn't just show up one day with all of this talent and knowledge and hard work and failures behind me. So you need to figure out where your success is going to come from. Now, I've never really told the scrapbook story before to anybody that I owned a retail store, because it's something like, well, that doesn't look like the trajectory that you should take as a digital media marketing professional, as a blogger, as a podcaster. But you know what? That's part of my story. And if I didn't have those women sitting there in my shop one day, my trajectory would have been totally different. So I want you to go back and think about the things in your life, the things in your profession that don't look like they fit, but you need to dig and figure out why it's there, why it's supposed to be there. Not try to shove it under the rug or pretend it didn't happen. I mean, mortuary science. I went to college for a little bit for mortuary science. I'm still not sure what that brings me today, but I don't know. I deal with people that don't talk. I don't know what it is. There's a lesson in there somehow. The contacts we make at these conferences, the contacts that we make online, are probably the strongest indicators of our success. My success is under the waterline. And I'm going to give you this really good example of it. When I was very young, my idea of success was when I would think to myself, I am successful, right? Then it changed. Then I wanted other people to say, she is successful. Now, where I am later, 25 years later, is I want people to say, she helped me become successful. That's where the success lies for me. That's what I do. That's where I work under the waterline. So when I see so many people come up to me and tell me, and not just me, but my peers and contemporaries that are also kind of like get on the stage every once in a while or get to teach a class or internet famous, which I am not. I'm under the waterline. They want to know what the secret is. And I said, the secret is you need to go to the rest of your life and pull out the things that matter and figure out how to make the 90% bigger to rise up so you get more of the 10% on the top. I've been on Google Plus for 2.5 years or however long it's been. And Rick said I have 1.5 million followers, which honestly I don't think is impressive. I used to say if I had $1, like now I'm like, I've upped it. If I had $10 for every follower, then I'd be successful, but I don't. It doesn't do anything unless you do something with those numbers. I have people email me and say, I joined the platform a week after you. If I had only joined when you did, I would be an overnight success like you. Really? Did you have all that other stuff? What's under your waterline? What's going on? What's your 90%? Nothing? Oh. No, it's not going to happen like that. And it's not just this platform. It was Twitter. It was Second Life. Does anybody remember Plurk? Right? Yeah, I have picked some duds, man, let me tell you. I am not, because what I do, like my kind of, what I want to do professionally is reinvent myself all the time, but it's this merger between technology, marketing, and communications. So I have to be out there, so I have picked duds. This one just happened to hit for me. In 5 years, it's going to be something else, and I'm going to be here maybe talking about something else. But the idea is no matter what I do, no matter where my talents are, no matter what you do or where your talents are, You need to pick from your past and figure out how to build your base, build that iceberg. People is the only way I think you can get there. So this idea of icebergs, right? So I've told you that icebergs are 90% under the water, 10% above. The bottom has to get bigger before the top will get bigger, right? So you have to work on that. I liked this one because I used to wonder what really successful, really famous, and those two words are not the same thing, people would feel when others would reach out to them for help. I'm like, are you just freeloading? Are you riding on the 10% of this person trying to get there without building your own 90%? And then I thought about it and I'm like, no, it's more like having a great ride and a great party. These penguins are having a great time, right? The key about this is to make sure that you're strong enough to support those that you want to help and that you want to make successful as well. I can't help others unless I have a good base for myself. And if you can see this also, the one caveat of all of this is you have to take care of yourself in this industry first. And I don't mean that in a self-serving, negative way. If you don't build your base, if you're not constantly learning, if you're not constantly exploring and improving, you'll get cut off at the waterline. The weakest point and the most dangerous point for an iceberg is at the waterline where the waves hit. People constantly want to knock you down. You can't let that happen. You have to be stronger than that, and you have to keep it where you're able to pull from your past and build your base. So those are kind of some of the things that I wanted to bring to everybody. Like I said, it's really strange for me not to be teaching and more to want to kick off this idea of how to start New Media Expo, how to start this weekend. How many people are brand new here this year? Whoa, that's awesome. Okay, you're gonna have the time of your life this weekend. It's really good. I don't have to go into the typical networking things for you, but what I want to tell you is that for me anyway, and I know there's a lot of people here, like I'd never met Lee, who's coming up after me, never met him in person before, and I have been a huge fan of his for a decade. And we were backstage just talking like old friends kind of thing. It was really nice because that's what this community does. If you have a base that you can build with other people, the tip of the iceberg is just going to be monumental. So please look at that and make sure that you can build that base for yourself this weekend. Thank you.